Hello everyone and welcome to my Werewolf Companion Druid guide for Season 4. Werewolf Companion Druid is a build that relies on Aspect of the Alpha, Aspect of the Wild Rage, Aspect of the Stampede, and Storm's Companion to give your wolf some pretty amazing damage, as well as being able to spam the active due to the new Wolf CDR temperings alongside Pack Leader. The build is very fun and at high gear levels can push pretty high. Currently on Maxwell's ladder, the highest wolf clear is Pit 110. This isn't bad when you consider that this build was considered a D tier build in previous seasons. So first off, let's hop on into the offensive package and take a look at aspects. Firstly, we're going to need Aspect of the Alpha. This lets our wolves become werewolves and increases their damage by 230% on a two-handed weapon. You're going to want critical strike damage, max life, willpower, wolf's damage, and petrified duration on your weapon. Or instead of petrified duration, you could go elemental surge if you want a little bit of burst. But with petrified duration, this is going to make petrify last quite a bit longer, which is going to be a nice little defensive cooldown, as well as give you some increased damage for longer whenever you are bossing. Next up, we're going to want Aspect of the Wild Rage on our gloves. This was changed in Season 4 to give our wolves double the effectiveness from Bestial Rampage, so it gives your wolves a whopping 60% attack speed and 100% increased multiplicative damage. You're going to want critical strike chance, willpower, attack speed, wolf damage, and wolf attack speed. You're going to want to have your greater affix on willpower, as well as you're going to want to make sure your masterworks hit either willpower or wolves damage. Alrighty, so next up, we want Aspect of the Stampede. On our necklace, this gives us 45% more damage and one extra companion, giving us even more damage. You're going to want Called Wild, critical strike chance, envenom, wolf's damage, and wolf CDR on your amulet. This is going to be a little bit difficult to find, so do not feel bad if you're struggling to find it. Realistically, you're probably going to be able to get Call the Wild and envenom on it, but you're not going to be able to get all three because, again, I've been searching, spinning obols. This is going to be very difficult to find. But that's okay. And then you're going to want to put a resist gem in, depending on, kind of how your amulets and rings and stuff rolled to figure out what your resist situation is. All right, next we have Storm's Companion. This is going to give you a whopping plus 13 ranks to your wolf skill, turn their damage into lightning damage, and give them a cool little blink electric blast to hit your targets. Unfortunately, it does not turn them into a storm skill yet, so no combination with Thunderstruck can happen yet, maybe in the future. But yeah, it's going to be pretty solid. For this, it's going to have damage reduction, max life, companion movement speed, and you're going to want to make sure that you get your masterwork and a greater affixed version onto wolves. However, keep in mind, if you don't find the greater affix on wolves, it's just going to change it from plus 13 down to plus 11. So yeah. Alrighty, so this is a defensive item, but I just want to show you this helm real quick just to show you that you can get plus 8 to wolves on your helm, which is also pretty relevant. You can get a whopping 29 ranks if you use Mad Wolf's Glee on your chest piece, as well as 26 if you're just going like a regular build without Mad Wolf's Glee. Mad Wolf's Glee is a pretty solid honorable mention. You can run it in the chest piece slot if you're doing lower gear. However, once you start needing more like increased defense, you're going to want to swap over to the chest piece, so you can run something like Aspect of Cyclonic Force, or so you can get the plus 8 ranks to Debilitating Roar, so you can try to go infinite in your Debilitating Roar and do stuff like that. Okay, lastly, we have Aspect of the Unsatiated. Aspect of the Alpha does now tag our wolves as a werewolf skill, so this gives you a nice little 25% damage or bonus damage when you cast your wolves over 50 spirit. Then we're going to have max life, critical strike chance, chance to make enemies vulnerable, wolf damage, wolf CDR on one ring, and then you're going to have critical strike chance, max life, attack speed, wolf damage, and wolf CDR on the other rings. Now you're going to want, you can get away with willpower early on, but you are going to want to switch over to max life as you try to push the higher pits, because defense really becomes the name of the game in the higher pits that I have found. We'll be utilizing the wolf CDR temperings. This is going to take our wolf's active all the way down to 2.75 seconds, which is really nice, and it's going to let us spam it at higher gear levels without having to rely on Pack Leader so much. But if you have Claw on, you should be fine prior to that. And remember, again, finding Call the Wild, Envenom, and getting your masterworks on everything is going to probably take a little while. You're going to end up spending a lot of time on it. However, it does give you something to chase in the game, as well as it makes you scale incredibly well as you do get the right gear pieces. Alrighty, that's going to do it for the offensive stuff. So let's go ahead and hop on into the defensive stuff. The main focus of our defensive cooldowns is going to be trying to get Debilitating Roar to as low of a CD as possible. So at low gear levels, it'll be kind of high, but as you find more and more gear, you should get to the point where you're going to have it up almost all the time. Alright, so firstly, we want Aspect of Might on the helmet. This is going to give us a 20% damage reduction for 7 seconds. You're going to want Ranks to Wolves cooldown, Armor, Wolf attack speed, and Debilitating Roar cooldown on that. Next up on the chest piece, you're going to go for Aspect of Concussive Strikes. It's going to give us a nice 20% damage buff and a little bit of CC by dazing enemies. Another tech you can do is go Aspect of Cyclonic Force for even more damage reduction to your wolves and yourself. You're going to want Max Life, Armor, Debilitating Roar. You're going to want Debilitating Roar to be your greater affix as well as where you put all your master working ranks. Then you're going to want Wolf attack speed and Debilitating Roar cooldown reduction. Next up on your boots, we're going to go Aspect of Metamorphosis to give us access to Unstoppable. You're going to want whatever resist you're currently missing. That's going to be dependent on just kind of how your gear rolled on your rings. You're going to want Max Life, Movement Speed, up to a chance to stun. The reason we run this is because really there's nothing else, so it's just a nice little bit of CC because you're already going to be over the 100% attack speed cap on your wolves just from the 3 items plus Bestial Rampage. So, yeah. And then you're going to want, movement speed, the chance to stun, and this gives us nice access to Unstoppable since we're not really running anything else that does give us Unstoppable. So some honorable mentions in the boots is Aspect of the Wild Rage. This can give you a 20% damage buff. Another combination you can do if you don't want to run the Petrify is you can go Flicker Step, which also, combines really nicely with Lacerate over Petrify because it gives you a 40% damage buff whenever you crit 10 things with Lacerate, and it lasts for 10 seconds. So Lacerate only has a 35-second cooldown, so when you factor in the fact the buff lasts for 10 seconds and you can reduce the CD by 10 seconds with Flicker Step, you really only have a 15-second downtime on that 40% damage buff, so that's not really that bad, and it's actually pretty useful to use as like a dodge for various effects. So yeah, it is something to try out. The next thing I want to go ahead and point out is the Infinite Debilitating Roar combination. This is really what we're going for as our main defensive package. You'll notice we have Debilitating Roar cooldown on our helm, as well as Ranks to Debilitating Roar. When you put Ranks in Debilitating Roar, it does reduce the cooldown. We are also running Bold Chieftains on our other ring, which is going to reduce the cooldown of our shout skills, which Debilitating Roar was turned into a shout skill this season by 2 seconds per nearby enemy up to 6 seconds. So you are still going to see somewhat of a downtime on the boss, but that being said, you can have this up a lot, but it does require you to have good gear rolls. It's going to require you to have, the CDR rolls and stuff like that to really get it there. But I think it's definitely probably the most worthwhile combination for defense that you can go for just because of the sheer amount of damage reduction that it brings. So as when you look here, it's at 14.3 seconds when you have when you have the plus 13 ranks, and then when you factor in the Bold Chieftains, it's going to reduce it by 6 seconds, taking it down to like 8 or 9 seconds. So it's just a ton. And then I don't think this is also factoring in the Debilitating Roar CDR. So like if this does have a CD right now with the current setup, it's only going to be a couple seconds. All right, let's go ahead and hop on into our boons. Scythe Talons and Avian Wrath. If you're pushing high pits, you might consider dropping Avian Wrath and doing Iron Feather, or even dropping Scythe Talons and getting Iron Feather for the extra max life. You're going to want Pack Leader. This is going to let you reset your Wolf's cooldown. Now, later on, it's not as important, but early on, this is going to really help you before you have a Wolf CDR tempering in order to help you reset your Wolf so you can actually cast it more. And then you can go either Masochistic or Overload, whichever your preference is. Masochistic will give you some healing whenever you cast shapeshifting abilities, or I guess whenever you critically strike with shapeshifting skills. And then Overload will give you a little bit of lightning damage. Now, keep in mind that Masochistic does combo decently well with Lacerate, because every single time you crit, it's going to give you it's going to heal you for 5% of your max life. So that kind of turns your Lacerate into even kind of like a defensive combo. So that is pretty sweet. All right, so now let's go ahead and hop on into the skills. So there's a couple combinations you can run. The first combination is going to be Claw. Enhanced Claw, Wild Claw in combination with Pulverize, Enhanced Pulverize, and Primal Pulverize. The reason why this one is really good is because Primal Pulverize will give you access to a 20% reduced damage buff. So when you combine that with Debilitating Roar, reducing nearby enemies' damage dealt by 70%, it almost turns you to where you can kind of be like a support druid if you were playing in groups, because you're reducing everything's damage by so much. Another option, if you're doing more like speed farming, lower tier stuff, some people do run it in high tiers, but I personally don't prefer it because I think Shred is an awkward and clunky skill. But you can go Maul, Enhanced Maul with Fierce Maul in combination with Shred, Enhanced Shred, and Primal Shred. What this does is allows you to keep up both your buffs, you know, with Bestial Rampage, and it just lets you get around the map faster. Maul does build Fortify pretty nicely, but it has a lower lucky hit chance, so if you're at lower gear levels, I almost would recommend you to go with Claw, because if you don't have those CDRs and you need Pack Leader, you're going to find that you're not going to proc it as much with Maul than as with Claw, because Claw has a 50% lucky hit chance. On top of that, it has 20% attack speed built into it, and it also has a 15% chance to attack twice, so the action economy of Claw just ends up proccing your Pack Leader for your Wolves way more. Alright, so you're going to want to go Predatory Instincts and Iron Fur. So Iron Fur is pretty cool because it gives you 9% damage reduction while in your Werebear form, and it does last for 3 seconds after you get outside of your Werebear form. Alright, let's go ahead and move on into the defensives. The defensives, you're going to want Vigilance, you're going to want Ancestral Fortitude. Vigilance is really good, especially if you go for that like infinite Debilitating Roar combo, because you're going to be able to have this up a lot. A couple of honorable mentions is if you wanted to go Cyclonic Rift with aspect of Cyclonic Force. This is going to give not only you, but also your wolves an extra 10% just damage reduction, so non-physical and physical, because aspect of Cyclonic Force also makes it apply to the physical, and this does go up if you put ranks into Cyclonic Force, so that is pretty sweet. You could go Cyclone Armor with the Preserving Cyclone Armor, which is going to give you another 30% damage reduction buff every 10 seconds. And then another thing I've seen some people doing was go Blood Howl, Enhanced Blood Howl, and then with Innate Blood Howl or Preserving Blood Howl. Either are kind of fine since we are running a core skill, so that's pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and move on into our companion skills for the bread and butter. All right, so for the companion skills, you're going to want Wolves, Enhanced Wolves, Brutal Wolves. This is going to give you another attack speed buff for your Wolves, as well as a 25% damage buff. You're going to want to max those out. You're going to want to take Poison Creeper, Enhanced Poison Creeper, and Brutal Poison Creeper. The reason we take this is because it gives us a 20% crit buff, which is just pretty nice. It also will reset with Pack Leader. So since I do run Claw in the version, we'll see a lot of resets with our Poison Creeper, whereas if you run Rabies, you're going to want to swap out your Concussive Strikes for like the Virulent aspect. Or something like that, just to make sure that you have some cooldown reduction on Rabies. Rabies is pretty good in combination with X-Falls because it has a really high lucky hit coefficient. So if you are wanting to run X-Falls, I would recommend running Rabies with the Virulent on your chest piece over running the Poison Creeper. And we're going to want Call the Wild to give us a whopping 120% damage buff when you have this in combination with your Amulet. And then we have Nature's Reach, deal 9% increased damage to enemies if they're slowed, immobilized, stunned, or knocked back. And, because, we have up to a 25% chance to stun, as well as we have Neurotoxin down here. If you do have Rabies or something that can spread the poison fast, you should be able to proc this damage bonus fairly easily. And keep in mind, your wolves do spread Rabies on their own with aspect of the alpha. All right, so coming right along down to Wrath skills, you're going to want Neurotoxin, 1 point to Toxic Claws, and then you're going to want Envenom. This gives you a 60% bonus critical strike damage. Now, keep in mind that the way this works is different. It doesn't give you bonus additive critical strike damage. It just gives you, it actually increases the multiplier or something like that by 60% is currently the working theory. That's why Envenom is so good right now. All right, going into our ultimate skills. So there's a couple of options here. You can go Petrify, Prime Petrify, Supreme Petrify. The other option was going Lacerate with Flicker Step that I mentioned earlier. This will give you a 40% increased damage buff whenever you critically strike. You do have to hit 10 targets with this, but it is also on a really low cooldown, and it also makes you immune. So this is pretty helpful on bosses, I want to say, just because like whenever you get into the pit and you have to dodge all these mechanics. Like just being able to press Lacerate to dodge stuff is actually pretty nice. And it also has the lowest cooldown out of any ultimate in the game. But at the same time, Petrify on bosses, when you run it in combination with the Petrify duration, does give you a nice damage buff with critical strike damage against bosses. All right, and so then we want Quick Shift. So this got changed in Season 4. When shapeshifting into a new animal form, you're going to deal 3% increased damage for 8 seconds, up to 18%. You're going to have Heightened Senses when shapeshifting into a new animal form. Your Werebear skill grants 6% damage reduction, and your Werewolf skills grant 6% movement speed, each for 6 seconds, and these bonuses are doubled while active. Then we have Natural Fortitude. This is going to be how we end up fortifying, and this is going to be very easy to reach max fortify, as we're going to be shape-shifting back and forth with our Claw, our Pulverize, or with our Maul and our Shred, whichever one you decide to go. All right, and then lastly, we want Bestial Rampage as our key passive. This combos with our Aspect of the Wild Rage. This is what gives us the 100% increased damage to our wolves, because they get double effectiveness when you have Aspect of the Wild Rage, as well as 60% attack speed. And the one last honorable mention, if you're playing on a controller and your core skills are being clunky or weird, you can always go Claw and Maul and run like a double basic setup just to make sure you can keep your buffs up. A lot of people think it's weird, but at the same time, it actually doesn't feel too bad. All right, let's go ahead and hop on into the Paragon. All right, so for Paragon, the main glyph that we're going to want is going to be Aspect of the Wild. So this is going to give us 267% increased companion damage, as well as it's going to increase our passive portion of the companion skills by 130% multiplicative. So this is pretty massive for our passive damage, because passive damage is no joke with Wolf Companions in Season 4. I'm talking like you can hit for like 7 million with your passive damage on Wolves. It's wild. It's kind of bonkers. So that's going to be the main one. We're going to be running Keeper. This is going to give us some nice all resist buff, as well as a 10% damage buff to non-physical damage. Now keep in mind that if you do not have Storm's Companion, this isn't going to buff your Wolf Companion's damage yet. However, I do think it's still worth running, because it gives you more resist all, and it helps you shore up those defenses. And then when it comes to my selection on pathing, I really just try to pick up as much defense as I can and minimize, minimize any like wasted stuff. So I'm really just going around trying to get to glyph slot to glyph slot to get as much damage and as much damage reduction as I can. And we do end up getting a ton of all resist out of our Paragon, right? So you can see here 13.5% plus 1.5 plus 1.5, so that's 16.5% all resist we get just out of this first part here, which is pretty nice. All right, moving right along, we're going to go into Heightened Malice with Spirit. So this is going to give us a nice critical strike damage buff and a 12% damage amp multiplier. It's also going to give us damage reduction from poisoned enemies. You're going to see here the reason why you go Heightened Malice first is because it's going to make your requirements to get the second buff, so you can get more damage reduction here. At least that was, the reason why I did it, is because you get a lot of benefit here. So you can see here you get a bunch of poison resistance, you get a bunch of damage to poison, damage to elites, etc. So like I felt like Heightened Malice was just a really solid first starter, because there's so many secondary bonuses that you want to actually be able to hit, and as you get further and further in, it's going to be harder and harder to hit those secondary bonuses, right? All right, Heightened Malice is going to be one of the only legendary nodes that we run. This is going to give us 45% increased damage while there's 3 or more poisoned enemies. We're going to kind of come over here to the left into the Constricting Tendrils passive. This is going to give us access to a decent dex one with Territorial. It's also going to give us access to a max life rune, as well as it's going to give us access to more all resistance and some damage over time reduction, which is another reason why I chose to go over to the Constricting Tendrils, is because it gave us easy access to some more all resist to shore up those. Coming up, we're going to go into the Thunderstruck tree. Now this one's actually pretty cool, and why I ended up going into this one early, I think I actually ended up going to this one second, was because it gives us damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. We put on our ring the up to a certain percent chance to make enemies vulnerable, and that's partially so we can combo with this, because right here we have 12% damage reduction for vulnerable enemies, which is pretty nice. And then this is going to give us 10% damage reduction depending on how much Fortify we have. All right, moving right along, we go into the Ancestral Guidance. After spending 75 Spirit, you're going to deal 30% increased damage for 5 seconds. So this is going to be pretty darn nice because we are running Pulverize. Pulverize costs 35 Spirit, so you're going to proc this a lot because we aren't running any Spirit cost reduction. So you should proc this a decent amount. It'll give you a nice damage amp to your wolves. And then lastly, we come over here and this is where we get wilds from our Lust for Carnage. Keep in mind, if you are leveling, you are going to want to switch and go like something like Lust for Carnage first. And the main reason for that is going to be because you're going to want to have this wilds glyph as fast as possible. This is the #1 glyph you want to get first. This, what we have here, is going to be, kind of like a post level 100 board. All right. Now, and as an honorable mention, I did want to point out, I don't know if, it doesn't look like I have it here, but I want to show you guys something I thought was kind of interesting, right? So you have Inner Beast. They changed Inner Beast. After shape-shifting, your spirit costs are reduced by 5% for 10 seconds, up to 45% if you reach 10 stacks. This bonus resets and reduces the cooldown of your ultimate skills by 5 seconds. An interesting tech you could do that I think would be pretty cool with Lacerate specifically is you could run Inner Beast with the flicker step, so as you're spamming Petrify, you're actually reducing the cooldown of your ultimate skill again, so you could have even higher uptime on your Lacerate. So this is something I'm thinking about kind of experimenting with, and you would swap out the Lust for Carnage board because the Inner Beast one is a very high intelligence one, so it's a very obvious fit for wilds. But anyways, so that's gonna do it for the Paragon, guys. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys found this informative on all the various things that you can do. I'm going to have links in the description to 3 different variants of the build. One for speed farming that's going to utilize Shred, my preferred one that I think has the best feel, as well as the highest DR with Pulverize, and then one for the controllers that's going to run a double basic setup just to make it easier for you controller players. But all right, guys, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.